All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining the session today. We have with us Durlabh today, and I'll just introduce the speaker. Um, Durlabh Ashok is a community organizer, a published author, and a climate action advocate. He is a seasoned youth engagement specialist and is engaged in climate action in national and international spaces. He's an award-winning youth leader recognized by the United Nations in 2019 for his grassroots climate action interventions. He has 6+ years of experience in entrepreneurship, sustainability, and innovation. His work has been featured in various news organizations such as Times of India, The Independent, and the News International, to name a few. He's passionate about supporting purpose-driven and inspired individuals to lead change in their communities. Thank you, Durlabh, for joining the session. We welcome you and looking forward to this exciting session today. Thanks a lot, and over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Purnima. It's a pleasure. Let me start with some of my takeaways from the COP, right? Because I was there closely following it. Right now I'm back home. But again, I had the opportunity to be there for the last 10-ish days, roughly, right? So let me first start with this question, right? So how many of you are aware of climate or COPs, I would say, right? Do you know what the COPs are in general, like on a scale of 1 to 5, right? Because I have prepared some presentations, and in that we will going through key, as I like to call them, key dates or key moments when it comes to climate negotiation or international participation. So 5 being the, you know what it is, and 1 is, oh, we have probably heard it in the news somehow, right? And yeah, I see a couple of questions already. So the 1 is like, you don't know what COPs are or just have heard about them on news, right? And 4 and 5, it's more like, oh, I've been to COP or I know what the COPs are. So one of the key outcomes that we were hoping for this year, right, was on loss and damage. And thanks to the COP26 that was in Glasgow last year, right, it was put on an agenda, loss and damage. So what loss and damage really means, essentially, it's a pledge by the developed countries to allow to finance basically the damages that the developing countries or Annex 2 countries, as it's called in the United Nations UNFCCC language, to do financing, right? So there was this global finance fund as well. So there are a bunch of things that we were hoping for at COP, but one of them was on loss and damage, and ultimately something coming out of it, right? So I was just checking the news in the morning for the last day, and the the draft COP27 climate deal has been published, but like looking at the wording or the text of it, right? Still, I personally feel it's still too weak, because it's just stressing to the Paris Agreement, right? Paris Climate Agreement that we had, and it uses language like pursuing efforts to limit global warming or temperature, as I would say, by 1.5 degrees, right? And like still there isn't any mention of fossil fuels, for example, right? So it's still a very long way ahead. Couple of interesting observation I would observe, right? As what we saw and witnessed at last year's COP26 in Glasgow, we probably will be going in extra time, meaning that we will be seeing today or tomorrow possibly making sure that everything is finalized. So we might see a bit of overtime at COP, right? And just quickly also highlighting the fact as to what's happening around Twitter, because that's also interesting, and that's a place that I usually gauge a public sentiment or response towards any global phenomenon or any global engagements that we might see, right? And this time what we are seeing is, because of the, I would put it as a mess. I don't know, because I saw the multimeter, I believe, the poll, right? Someone said that they found Elon Musk to be their inspiration or something like that, right? But unfortunately, since this takeover, we have seen a lot of disinformation on especially relating to climate action and climate crisis. on Twitter, unfortunately. Also, one of the numbers that stood out to me this year was the amount of fossil fuel lobbyists that we see at COP, right? It was roughly in 700 figure, right, or 600 something, but I would round it off to 700 just to be just for a round figure, right? So 700 people and that are lobbying for fossil fuel industries, right? This number is greater than a lot of countries' delegation, right? There are only like 1 or 2 countries that have delegation at the COP larger than this, right? So one that comes to mind is the next COP that is the country that is going to have like host the next COP, the UAE. They have roughly 1,000 people, I believe, but still a very large number, right? When you look at the number of delegates each country had, but it's mind-boggling at the same time that fossil fuel industry was able to bring in um, roughly 700 people lobbying for their own interests, right? So quite interesting stuff. But unfortunately, that's how these conferences go. So please let me know, like if you have anything specifics that you hope to learn from today's session, because again, I want to make it as interactive as possible. And one of the things that will allow me to do that is to have a interactive discussion with all the participants here today. Because like again, as I said, I have prepared something like I have prepared a presentation as well as some verbal remarks here and there. But my hope is that I can make it as interactive as possible as well. Um, Try to see what the audience is looking to learn from this session and how I can accommodate that as well. Right? So that's something that I'm really hoping for. Since the the title, I believe, of today's session is Beyond Rhetoric, right? So what, like why I really suggested that is because a lot of the times what we hear is, especially when it comes to climate crisis or climate action, we see a lot of talks, right? Like we say, let's do that, right? But ultimately what has to done is we don't have to like talk that much, but unfortunately that's what I'm going to do today. But hopefully through this talk you would be mobilized and you would be encouraged to take action within your own communities, within your own cities, within your own countries, right? Just trying to play my part ultimately, right? So let me start off um, with another interesting thing that I found at COP. I don't know if you had ever, like some of you had ever a chance to attend to COP. So this year was my third COP actually, so it's not my first time at the COP. And one of a interesting surprise that we saw, especially in thanks to UNICEF and last year COP presidency was the Youth and Climate Pavilion, right? That was again one of the happening place to be at during the entire COP. So I think like from the design to the programming, because I also helped with it. So that's why I'm sort of like promoting it and hopefully for the next year. But I think we did got a I would say almost a verbal confirmation, I would say, from the youth minister of UAE. We had a bilateral with them for the COP and as well as looking at various issues that we highlighted with them. I will go into just a minute into what those are. And if you had attended COP ever, you will kind of agree with it, right? So the UAE delegation basically they did say that they would look into it how we can more like create a more inclusive space for young people and children, especially, right? And one of the demographics that I work with is also children, right? Through the organization by the name of Plan for the Planet that I work with. They are based out of Munich in Germany, and like one of my main motives, or I would say goals throughout 2020s and forward, has been to engage children in the climate discussion as well, not just young people that we categorize at youth, right? So coming back to some of the demands that we put forward, not per se demands, but observation or things that we personally thought could be improved upon. Number one of the list was making sure that young people and children that are at conferences are taking proper nourishments, right? So we're talking about foods because Usually at COPs, what happen is that we see 5x, 10x the amount, the increase of any food items that you might be able to get from just like 10, 15 minutes outside of the venue. So that was one of the biggest thing that we discussed with Her Excellency Youth Minister of United Arab Emirates, UAE. And another thing that I want to emphasize on, I think this was particularly for this year COP perhaps, but we haven't really seen it for the previous COPs that at least that I attended, was the disaster that a lot of people faced coming to Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt and finding out that their booking has been cancelled for the accommodation, right? And a lot of people were stranded for 24 hours, 48 hours. Like I know personally people that had to wait 48 hours just to get a room, and it was a very crappy room. I would highlight that as well. So just quick happening from the COP. I think that should be it. Let me just quickly glance over. Yeah, I think that's it. I also heard a question from one of the attendees, right? I think let me touch a bit on this. So it was regarding the reforestation or deforestation, I believe, when one participant said, okay, we should, and he talked about the importance of forestation, right? And I kind of agree with you, especially in relation to the biodiversity loss, right? And what kind of habitat it can really nurture, because again, it's very beneficial for not that local area, but one of the work that we do at Plant for the Planet is also looking at new research that we do with our scientists in Mexico, Yucatan Peninsula. Basically, we have a very big forestation over there that we take care of and plant more trees. So just wanted to highlight that. And with that, if anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself, right? As I said, and as Purnama has also mentioned in the chat, feel free to raise your hand. Also, write your questions in the chat. Happy to answer those. Let me see if I can share my screen. So again, it's a bit outdated slide, but since I didn't really had a chance to update it, but again, a lot of concepts and things and knowledge that we are going to discuss here today, they still hold true, right? So without further ado, so what we are going to discuss today, right, is look at the climate change, global warming, because again, especially when I was starting my own journey, I had to use them interchangeably. But again, these are two different phenomena as we will discuss today, and also low carbon development, right? This is again an area that I work in. All right, so a quick Q&A. Like one thing that I really am interested to know is what climate change feels to you, right? What it is for you, because what I want to really hear at this point in time, and also just a quick heads up that there would be certain Q&A coming throughout the session, because as I said, right, this has to be an audience-driven engagement. Otherwise, it will be more like a lecture, but not a masterclass, quote unquote, right? So yeah, happy to hear any personal feedback, like what does it look like to you in your own local community, in your own city, right? For example, for me, it might be quite different. Like climate change would look quite different compared to what other people or what other communities might be facing, right? Because one thing that I have come to realize, especially by being at COP and interacting with a lot of people, climate change means different, or climate crisis seems different to a lot of people, but ultimately it has the same underlying cause that we will discuss in this session. But again, before we move ahead with the presentation, just wanted to quickly gauge the room as to what might climate change means to you, and just hoping to hear some answers. Let me see where I can, yeah, I can see my chat. So just a couple of answers, I think, if I were to get a, what does it mean to you, right? Is it mean a urban flooding? Does it mean that your crops get destroyed, for example? So what does it really mean for you, right? What is climate change for you? So hoping for quick answers. so that we can move on. Yeah, please unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you for this session. So, I live in Delhi now, but I'm from Allahabad, and from what I can see in Allahabad, there's pretty much change in the flow of river. So, I mean, Allahabad is called the Sangam city, and the river Ganga is literally, there's so much change in the flow of the river. The color of the river has changed. I mean, I remember as a child it was blue, now it is brown, and the level is low. In some seasons it is like so high it feels like flooding, but in some seasons it is mostly dry, and that affects a lot of crop patterns there. So yeah, I mean, from my hometown all I can say is that, and from Delhi, air pollution is the biggest thing.
Awesome. Thank you, Shubhi. Just one quick thing before I let you go. Like, what are your hopes to like for this session, right? Since I have you already here with me. What do you hope to learn out of this session? Yeah.
I hope to learn how I can get more engaged. I mean, in how I can help more.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I'm trying to do all I can, but it feels like I can still do more.
All right, that's very good to hear, and I will definitely try to address this and try to share some of the various ways that you can. So yeah, Bhavan, could you?
Thank you.
Thank you, Shubhi.
I'm basically, hi, I'm Bhavan. So right now, I'm pursuing my master's in Agriculture University, and right now I'm in Bengaluru. I am from Bengaluru. So since childhood, I have been seeing Bengaluru. Now, early morning when we wake up here, it will be very cold, and in the afternoon it's so hot, and in the suddenly in the evenings it rains. That is like which is supposed to be normal. It's normal. There is abnormality in this the season that we are in. So I think that is about the climate change, and even Shubhi was telling about this, Delhi thing, right? So yeah, I feel that is what I
Yeah,
see.
yeah, thank you, Bhavan. And what about what you hope to learn from today's, or anything that you want to emphasize, or like again how I can help with that particular thing? Yeah.
Yeah, basically, I'm working with one as a for a climate change as a youth in climate champion. So I wanted to know that how climate change has become, this topic has become so that everyone is talking about climate change. What exactly that we can do as a youth leader or something like that. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm looking for that kind of what exactly on ground we can do, and we have to, in what sense we have to see as a climate change. Yeah.
Yep. Thank you, Bhavan. So, like again, what I essentially heard was the extremes, right? We are moving towards the extreme in a sense that again, if we were to get rain, usual or floods or anything, right? This is again what we saw, especially in the South Asian context, right? As well as Southeast Asian countries, and especially African countries, because I had an opportunity to talk to some of my African colleagues while I was at COP, and this thing is it's all across the board, right? That what we are seeing in terms of weather patterns and extreme climate events, right, throughout the world, especially in the global South countries, is that it's moving towards extremism, whether it be rain, whether it be flooding, whether it be anything that you might feel, even I would say even snow, because I had a talk with one of my colleague, and they were facing, especially in relation to winter months, right? And since it's already here, the winter months in the global South countries, right? So it's what's climate crisis is it's really doing. It's bringing us to the extreme patterns, and we will unfortunately see it accelerating throughout the years, because like the hope was that we have a 1.5-degree limit when it comes to rising global temperature, but again on a trajectory that we are, we don't see it a very achievable goal. It's still not impossible, but it's getting harder with every moment that we waste, right? So let's move on. Let me see. Yeah. So again, this is a news that I saw recently, right? And again, a very heartbreaking news in a way, because these type of news have been pretty common throughout last couple of months, right? You will see it probably every once a month or few times a month, right? And what really happened was temperatures usually are a lot higher than they were before, right? So what a car really acts, it's almost as if a perfect engine for your greenhouse gas effect, right? So what greenhouse gas effect really is, we will discuss it a bit further. But essentially, what happened was uh, that with this especially, let me see what, yeah, as I said, greenhouse gas effect, right? The heat was trapped in the car, and it got hotter and hotter, and which led to the baby found died in the back of a car, right? This is essentially what's happening with our world as well, right? Climate change and global warming. So just a quick refresher. I know it might a lot of people might already know about what global warming is or what the greenhouse gas effect. I just wanted to quickly like get a quick refresher out of the way so that we are all on the same page, right? So what essentially happens is that Earth is like Earth get its energy from the sun. I'm talking about solar radiation, heat energy, right? And the atmosphere, it retains some of the energy, but with introduction of greenhouse gases, as we like to call them, right? What happens is that the heat gets trapped, right? And the causes are quite like it's a very black and white. What's contributing to these greenhouse gases is industrial revolution as well as population growth, right? I don't know if you saw this news or not, but we are already 8 billion people on this planet, right? The 8 billion baby has already been born. So we don't see the population of the world stabilizing anytime soon, but it will probably around 12 or 11 billion, I believe. I was doing some research, and that was, I believe, was the number. So still a couple of billions, like we are short of. But these are the two main drivers of greenhouse gas effects or global warming, as I like to put it. So yeah, like these are the typical greenhouse gases. Carbon dioxide is typically talked about and portrayed as the main devil. Like it is to some extent, but methane and nitrous oxide, for example, are much more potent. And at this COP, we saw a global methane pledge that we saw coming out of an agreement where I believe 150 country or 150-ish countries signed up um, for limiting the methane release into the atmosphere, because again, methane and nitrous oxide, even though their concentration in the atmosphere might be low, but due to the potent nature of these gases, they have a much more greenhouse gas effect on the atmosphere. And we've already heard about CFCs. Hope, like again, we did ban a lot of chlorofluorocarbons in early 2000 and early 90s, and that has played a very good role, especially in relation to the reverse of damage that CFCs cause to the ozone layer, right? So yeah, carbon dioxide, obviously, what we see a lot of talk or discussion about net zero or any other technical term that you might see, they are referring mostly to the carbon dioxide, right? And one of the biggest ways it's being generated, why it's to generate electricity through coal, oil, or gas, for example, right? And mainly it's for generating electricity. If you look at worldwide emissions, where it comes from the most. Also, what we have seen is that clearing of forests for farmlands or new development in the area, they also contribute to greenhouse gases, because trees are a sponge for greenhouse gas, especially carbon dioxide, right? They take it in when they're alive, and converts it into oxygen that they release out. But once that tree dies, it releases all the oxygen, all the carbon dioxide it has captured through its lifetime. Like when we burn the wood, for example, of a tree, that's what it's released into the atmosphere, right? So yeah, we are on another Q&A. So we have already looked at what climate change is really looking like for in your own personal capacities and your own communities, right? So one interesting thing is how like each of us contribute to worsen the effects of climate change, right? For example, me, I think it's very straightforward because I just came back from COP and looking at something called um, uh, something called a carbon footprint, right? And I believe that's a very important tool that each and every one of us on this call, um, they can just quickly go online and try to calculate their own carbon footprint. For me personally, it would have been the one area that it would be the most would be through the air travel that I do, right? But I try to mitigate it as much as possible through virtual engagement. But climate negotiations are another beast that is really not possible through online engagement. So that ultimately is why we have like 40,000-ish people in Sharm el-Sheikh at the moment. So yeah, just a quick question, like how do you contribute to the worsening of climate change, right? Yeah, quickly, if you want to type it in the chat, feel free to do so, and like unmute yourself if you have something to share. Like which activities do you think in your own personal life, right, contributes to the worsening of climate change? I think this is the very important. Yeah, I see Kazmi. Yeah, please.
Hello, Mr. Durlabh. How are you?
I'm good. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Yes, my suggestion is that we will have to engage together, and just like you are telling regarding the children's and regarding the young people to engage together. Just like my motive is that through the engagement of children's, and I like to train the children's regarding that environment preservation and regarding the pollution, regarding that how what is the climate change, so that our children will aware regarding the climate change, so that they can also try to contribute regarding the climate change, so that in future when they grow up and they know that's what the effect of climate change. Because now if children don't know regarding that what is the EQI, what is the COP, they don't know many things regarding that water scarcity. But when they grow up, they know, they not know much things about it. Because if they started their contribution from that childhood, then definitely when they grow up, they will have to their knowledge level and their very excellent level, so that they can contribution is very effective. And when the children will engaged, then they will same thing, they will contribute to their old parents, so that parents will see their nearby areas and try to change the things in their locality, and then whole lot definitely we can do great things.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that part. And again, some of the work that I've been doing, it's especially in relation to this. So any other, so I see a couple of comments, right? SF6, right? So I like again, but like I would agree with you. Like the reason why I've not really mentioned sulfur hexafluoride, I believe that's what the technical term is, because like again, the most common greenhouse gases effect, right? I don't believe that's being counted. But again, I will go back and try to do a bit of work on that. But again, as I said, these are a bit old slides. But again, interesting to know that you are pretty aware of all the greenhouse gases. So yeah, amazing stuff. So anyone else wants to add, like, what do you think? What actions contribute most to the worsening effect of climate change? Yeah.
We have another raised hand, Shubhi.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
I think for me it will be fashion or buying clothes that are made from, polyester, nylon, which are all fossil fuel derivatives. So yeah, I mean, I am part of the problem as well.
Yeah,
And
thank you, Shubhi. Yeah, go ahead.
and taking Uber or Ola instead of metro.
Yeah.
I mean, the list goes on. I can't describe it in like 2 lines how I'm a part of problem, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I think I would agree with you, especially the fast fashion um, that you identified, right? Another answer that I got from in the chat is from Deepak, open burning, right? Again, I think that's true because open burning is very inefficient for whichever purpose you are using, right? And let me take a moment to expand on fast fashion or what it is, right? A lot of big companies such as H&M or with Chelsea or any other like this big Western or European brands, what they are really in the business of, they are not in the business of fashion, but they are unfortunately in the business of fast fashion. And I had the opportunity to work with H&M to make sure that they are thinking about sustainability of the materials that they're using, right? So let me like throw out some numbers here, right? Because I was doing this research for a report that we are doing for UNICEF, and like this is I think 2 to 3 years back, and I was really stunned to found that it takes like 20,000 liters of water just to produce one piece of jeans, right? So if you look at what you could really do with the 20,000 water liters of water, right? You could possibly meet all your water needs for entire month, right? For one person, and think about how many pair of jeans we usually buy every year and throughout our older pairs, right? So again, this really gives you that stark context or stark comparison that will allow you to think about any decision that we make has a carbon footprint, right? Whatever we do, even if we are on this Zoom call, right? If there's AC air conditioning in your room, then you're contributing to the problem. Like, again, I really understand that in some areas you can't really do much without air conditioning, but most of the times it's just there to make us comfortable with the air temperatures, right? So like there are a lot of ways that we are contributing, as I said. So let's look at some of the historic events or dates, I would say, or year, I would say, like looking at what, like how previous convention, UNFCCC convention, for example, like how it came to be, as well as what kind of journey has like we are on since like 1985, right? So again, ice melting has been happening for many years now, but what the greenhouse gases is doing that it's making it worse, right? Because of the rising temperature, the ice melts faster and the sea level rises, right? We'll take a look, I believe, in this presentation a bit. So first time the major agreement that we had was in 1985, where 29 countries agreed on climate change, right? Because before this, even though we might see a slight mention of climate change, but there were no international agreement under the United Nations processes right before this. And also a quick interesting fact that it was like the first time it was reported on climate change, or like if we are burning coal or greenhouse gases or anything like that, like it was mentioned in 1800s that we might see a rising temperature. So we knew it for a very long time, and but it took 1985 in 1985. So I would say roughly 100 years before an international agreement was reached, like in these 29 countries. And the real achievement or the real milestone came in the Rio summit in 92, where the agreement of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, as we see it, was signed, as well as one other achievement that I personally really read into is the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, right? So what they do is they release some of their reports on yearly or once every 2 years or something like that basis, just taking a stock of the general climate situation in terms of where we are heading as a world. And usually they are almost in red, and unfortunately they are not being taken seriously in terms of, because they do mention clear steps, they also work on that, but it can be a bit technical at times. But again, I would advise and recommend all of you after this session, please go and take a look at the last IPCC report that came out very recently before the COP in 97. One of the protocol, or like Kyoto protocol as it's being referred to, was like it was agreed on in Turkey, or in Japan, sorry, where it really mentioned the carbon dioxide for the first time and other greenhouse gases. Before that, we didn't have any real real legally binding treaty, because it's really hard to have legally binding treaty before Kyoto Protocol. So as I said, UNFCCC came about, then we also got Kyoto Protocol. Another major milestone that we had was in COP15. We will take a look at it in just a minute. Again, I have included certain slides of these three countries, right? Australia, Malaysia, and Indonesia as a case study of what they have been doing in terms of all these protocols, so that we can learn from them essentially. But we will try to go over them really quickly, because I believe it might be a bit dry for all of you, because it will go into a lot of technical details. But let's first take a look at the UNFCCC, what it really is, right? So it's a United Nations framework on Convention on Climate Change, where 195, or I believe more than that now, have agreed upon to ratify whatever is being presented and agreed upon in these conferences that we call COPs, right? COP means Conference of Parties, and this year we had the 27th conference since the COP1 that took place in Bonn, Germany, I believe, back in 90s. And usually, as you can see, there are different Annex countries. So Annex 1 countries are usually the industrialized country, and Annex 2 countries are OECD members but not EIT parties. And non-Annex countries are usually the developing countries. Usually a lot of South Asian or Asian countries are non-Annex 1 countries. So these language is important, because it will allow us to look at what kind of linkages, how other countries are referring to each other, for example. So as I said, Kyoto Protocol was adopted in Kyoto, Japan. It was the main purpose of Kyoto Protocol, or what it really achieved, was create an international agreement linked to UNFCCC. Before Kyoto Protocol, we didn't really had any real binding agreement under the UNFCCC processes. If you look at the what was being done before the Rio Summit, the 92 Rio Summit, it was more like a bilateral or multilateral agreements that were being like put forward by different countries, but not a universal legally binding, or if not legally universal agreement on climate change. Like, again, you can read quite a bit on Kyoto Protocol and all the other protocols and convention that we will be discussing here. That the goal of the today is not to go into a lot of depth, but at the same time just try to give you enough overview that you have a clear understanding of what these protocols and convention really were all about. So as I said, it was a binding obligation on the developed countries to reduce their greenhouse gases emissions. Also, one thing that came out of it was the energy rating that you might see. Like if you go and buy any I would say electronics appliances or any electronics item, right, you will see an energy rating by the name of, like, usually it's on star. It says it's very highly efficient, right? So this was enforced via the Kyoto Protocol. So again, this has a lot of different effects that we might see 10 years, 15 years down the line. And now every product that has made has an energy rating and efficiency stamped on it. just to give you an idea of how energy efficient that is. Another important aspect of the Kyoto Protocol was it allowed all the parties, right? So the parties, I'm not generally meaning countries, but this was the moment in time where a lot of non-observers, right? Observers, sorry. That means that they were not necessarily a government or even a UN body. They were, for the first time, were able or allowed or facilitated into the United Nations Convention on climate change, for example. So another interesting outcomes, or the big COPs, as I like to call them, was COP15. This was in Copenhagen, and it took in 2009. Yeah. Again, one of the outcomes, or the interesting outcome, was the promise to fund action on reducing GHG gases. But if you look at it, right, it's essentially the same wording, or I would say a different way to put it, but it's the same promise by the developed countries to reduce the greenhouse gases emission, right? And the second one is just a sort of like a mechanism which allowed to measurement and verification of developing countries, like how much carbon they are carbon emissions that they are putting, and how to report that, for example. But the main was to fund the actions of reducing the greenhouse gases emissions that took place in Copenhagen, that is COP15 in 2009. So again, one of the outcomes was this concept of common principle, as we like to call them, common but differentiated responsibilities. What it really means is that we are all in together to mitigate or to adapt towards climate change, but at the same time, countries that have contributed a lot to the climate change, they have more responsibility compared to, let's say, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, or any developing countries that have historically very little carbon footprint, for example, right? So yeah, that is again one of the major achievements that we saw in COP15. Another thing that is again differentiated, but as I said, rather common aspects of responsibility, right? We are all in this together, but some countries have different more responsibilities compared to others because of the historical carbon emissions. So yeah, that was Copenhagen. Let me just skip this because again, this is Australia. So let's look at Malaysia example, because I think this might be more suited to where we are at, right? So they introduced this natural resource environmental amendment. It was basically an ordinance in 2001, right? Basically what they did was they provided a legal basis for the implementation of state forest policy, right? We talked about biodiversity, or someone talked about biodiversity a minute, or like when we were beginning the session, right? And this is essentially where Malaysia stepped in back in 2001, right? So it's been many years since it has been ratified, where it basically provided a framework for forest management. So another thing that they did was they created this long-term development plan by the name of RPJP, and they looked at what they can do from 2005 to all the way to 2025, right? So what we really need in terms of legislation or policy making is these types of plan, where we have like looking especially with relation to climate change, not just on yearly basis or government's tenure basis, but ultimately a multi-government agreement that like whoever is in power, they will pursue the policies, because they were initially part of the input that led to creation of that policy in the first place. So that is something that I wanted to highlight as well. Okay, let's skip that. So again, we already saw this, right? So temperature rise, we will see this. We will see extreme rainfalls, sea level rise, typical cyclones or typhoons, snowline. We will see a decrease in and a lot of snowing happening in the winter months, for example. Right at the same time, if I were to sum it, it will be just the extreme weather patterns that we'll be seeing towards the summer, as well as extremes that we'll be seeing towards the colder winter months. So let's quickly take a look at IPCC before we wrap today's session and open the floor for Q&A. So what IPCC does essentially, it allows everyone to look at where we are at as a country or as a world, I would say. So as you can see, right, it's basically projecting where we are at the sea level rise, right? And as you can see today, if I were to take this, we are at 0 sea level rise, right? And by the end of the century, the sea would have increased more than 1 meters. What this means really is that a lot of coastal cities in various countries will be flooded, right? All the coastal cities that you can see, like again, it's the same thing, that the global sea level will gradually increase over this century, and this is essentially to the loss of sea ice, glaciers as we call them, and the thermal expansion of ocean, because yeah, is there any question? All right. So as I said, right, because of oceans have a much larger capacity to basically absorb the heat, and that's why they are expanding thermally, as well as a lot of glaciers are melting, which leads to an increased overall volume of the world's ocean. So there has been a lot of assessment reports throughout these years, right? So the first one that came was in 1990, and what it looked at was, like, again, for the first time, clearly linked human activities to human activities such as carbon emissions or greenhouse gases emissions to global temperature rise, as well as climate change, right? Because before that, a lot of independent scientists were publishing a lot of material on this, but there was no uniform, or I would say independent research where scientists and environmentalists and all these people came together from different walks of life, different countries, different backgrounds, for one common goal, is to link this to the human activities basically, and it served as a very important stepping stone, as you will see in this IPCC reports if you read it after today's session. So the second assessment that came out was in 1996, as you can see. So sorry. So they don't usually come out every year, but after some time. And what they saw was that the greenhouse gases emission has continued to increase manifolds, right? And climate has changed over the past century as well. So if you want to look at their reports, you can go on ipcc.ch, and you will find all different reports that they're regularly publishing, even the reports that we'll not discuss here today in this session. The third assessment came about, the fourth assessment. So there are a lot of things, and the reason why I want to jump to fourth IPCC report is that because this was the point in time where there should be real warning that climate system warming is unequivocal, right? That what it means was that scientists was putting us on crisis mode or something like that, that we are not heading in the right direction, right? And this was sort of where things really took for the world, because even though these reports before this point were okay, what we should be doing, but after this point, whichever report that came about, it was all warnings, and it has unfortunately continued throughout 2022 with little real action that we have seen from governments and organizations that are really responsible to curb this emissions, for example. So here you can see a pattern of different observations or scientific observations that came out in the fourth assessment report. And as you can see, the temperature has been like there's a continuous pattern of a temperature rise, global average surface temperature rise, then the global average sea level rise difference, for example, right, and as well as snow cover in the northern hemisphere. So the snow cover has decreased throughout the years, but the sea level has increased, as well as the surface temperature, global surface temperature throughout 1900s to all the way to 2022. So the last IPCC report that we will be discussing is the 2014 one. But again, there are a lot of different IPCC reports that have come out since. But this one I want to really emphasize is because this was the first report that talked about the magnitude of the impact that we will see if nothing is done, right? And this was like the one of the first reports that I personally read, and it was a wake up for me essentially, because like if these reports can get technical at times, but if you do try to make like look at its summaries, because you can find it online as well without getting into too much details, it will I personally believe it will shock you out of whatever you are doing currently, right? And give you almost like an ultimatum as to where the world is headed, right? So again, it gave us that like we can't really continue business as usual, because there are a lot of big challenges if we want to limit our global warming or rise in temperature to 2 degrees, right? Because right now we are at almost 1.5 degrees, and if we want to limit that to 1.5 degrees or even 2 degrees, business can't be usual. A lot needs to be done, and most likely scenario will be this, but it's not still the worst case scenario. But at the same time, as I said, if nothing is being done, we will see a lot of destruction and loss of life that we will potentially see in the years to come. So I will probably end with this. Let me see. Yeah, so I will probably end this because the third part that I had for you guys were mostly on participation, and unfortunately, I believe we are almost like 30 minutes before the end of the session, so it's better that we don't go into that. But again, happy to take any questions at this point. There are a couple of points that I want to make that are not in their presentation, but I will address to those and come to those. But one message that you should be taking away from this, right, that we are in control of climate change, right? We are the ones, we are the problems. So ultimately, turn down, switch off, recycle, walk, and change. So that's ultimately what I want all of you to leave this session. One message that if you were to take from this session, it should be this. So yeah, happy to answer any questions before I go into the bit of an unstructured part of today's session. Yeah, happy to address any question, concerns, anything that you might want to ask me with regards to the material that we covered today. Happy to answer those as well.
I have one question in the chat box, Durlabh, from Deepak.
Yeah.
It says, can you please explain uncertainty principle again?
Yeah, so essentially what it means is that we don't really know where we are headed or how the uncertainty especially will increase. But at the same time, we know that general direction, right? A lot of times we hear is, oh, climate change, it's not man-made or it's not human-made, for example, because of various reasons. But what essentially it is that we will see a lot of uncertainty in terms of extreme weather patterns that will affect everyday people everywhere. But it's in the same direction. We can't really predict, okay, in let's say next year, this is what it will happen. So that's essentially what uncertainty principle is in relation to the climate change. I hope it answers your question.
Hello.
Hi, Deepak. Yeah.
Actually, I want to ask that how we can control this kind of open burning and all, so that it will help or kind of control from ourselves. As we have seen that in Punjab they used to burn rice, right? Rice stalks, and the
Yeah.
impact is on Delhi. So how that we can aware people or farmers so that it will be kind of protocol kind of we can develop if it is feasible. So
Yeah.
can you just tell me regarding that?
Yeah, I see it, and like you could potentially address it in two ways, right? So the one is obviously from the policy side and the government side of things, right? But unfortunately, what we have found looking at various examples in the region, right, it doesn't tend to work the best, right? So
Yes.
the approach that I will definitely advise on is the education part, right? Because one of the area or sector that I work in is with ACE, that Action for Climate Empowerment, and they have very like high emphasis on climate education, right? Because that is what will really differentiate you versus me, right? Because again, I'm going to throw statistics here, right? A recent report came out where it said, if let's say we are talking about just in terms of students, right? Let's say if only 16% of the students in developed countries were to receive a effective climate education, right, we could see a 19 gigaton reduction of carbon emissions on an annual basis. So that's a huge carbon emission just from this effective climate education. I believe that should be the approach, especially in relation to the farmers, because they tend to use a lot of natural resources like managing land, managing water, for example, within their area. So I think climate education has to be the key. Also, some efforts from the government side is advised, but at the same time, not to be overly dependent on just the policies or the laws that the government make, and not to be heavy-handed as well, because then the communication between the government as well as the farmers will break down essentially. So that's what I personally feel is the way to go.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepak. Any other question, guys? Happy to answer those. One of the questions, like again, feel free to unmute yourself and like again, feel free to interrupt me as well. Like coming to the unstructured part, right? There are a lot of ways where we and like I and you and everyone on this call can play the part. And one question that I received earlier was like, how can we play a more impactful and have a more impact on climate change, right? More like greater role, I would say. Is there are a lot of different ways where you can engage, right? So if you are, let's say, under 35, there are two constituencies that you can go right now and sign up, right? So the one is, let me just type it in the chat as well. It's called Younger. They are an official constituency of United Nations on the CCC process, right? So that's the process that we saw earlier that got like was approved in Rio Summit in '92, right? So through that, there are various opportunities and engagement opportunities that are agreed upon and shared. So this is again one constituency. Another constituency of United Nations Environmental Program is, let me just type it. I think I am. So that's major group for children and youth, I believe. So yeah, that's how it is pronounced. But you can type it major group for youth and children or children and youth, something like that. I'm forgetting the exact letter, but they work under the UNEP, so that's United Nations Environmental Program, and they are also an official youth and children constituency for their own different processes. So I see a question in the chat: what happened to COP20? What happened in COP27 for the South Asian investment, right? So like again, investment might not be the right word for this, because like we have been hearing about the global climate fund since 2 years now, right? Even before COP26. Unfortunately, or I would say fortunately, like I guess it's still a mixed bag, because we don't know exactly what will become or what will be in the final text of the declaration of the Sharm el-Sheikh, the COP27. But so far, what we have seen is a lot of different countries have pledged their individual supports towards that global fund, and not per se as an investment. Because a lot of times what happens is that we see a lot of investments or loans financing through those, right? And ultimately that's not the like again, what I have gathered and what I have seen is a lot of people aren't happy for that, right? Because usually they give out very heavy loans, and it's just bad for the economy of developing countries, especially, right? So not per se as an investment, but the climate fund, they are pitching in. But unfortunately, if you look at the destruction and the damages a lot of these countries have suffered, it's peanuts, right? Because like again in Pakistan we had floods, they had floods, right? And the damage cost is roughly $16 billion USD just for the infrastructure. And if you look at the global climate fund is $100 billion, right? So if you're not even counting the personal like loss and damage to the personal artifacts, to the personal properties, just the infrastructure, Pakistan would be requiring upwards of $16 billion. So what that fund leaves for the other countries, right? So it's a very small amount. But again, I would acknowledge that it's in the right direction, but probably too little, too late. But again, these like such are the climate negotiation, and especially in the UNFCCC processes. Also, a very stark difference that you can see. Like again, it's also mind-boggling at the same time, and just plainly sad that like I was looking at a recent profit report by like it just outlined like how much profit these big oil companies, these big multinational oil producers have been making in the last quarter, right? Just last quarter, it was roughly 99 billion. So again, it's you know where the money is, but unfortunately, due to the complex nature of this these climate negotiations, you are not able to move fast as you would like essentially as I would like, or any other young person especially would like this negotiations to be. Unfortunately, that's not the case. These negotiations are very complex in nature. But again, as I said, the global climate fund is peanuts, but at least it's in the right direction. And unfortunately, when it comes to loss and damage, we don't see quite a big dent or quite a big achievement, and real impactful, real world commitment or real world actions. But again, it's more like a lip service, to be honest. But again, if you understand how COPs works, that was the best that we could get out of the COP, right? At the same time, if you know, if you see the track record of previous COPs. So yeah, thank you for this question, Mark. Any other question, guys? Yeah, happy to answer those. Like again, as I clearly said in the beginning as well, I see someone. Yeah, Purnima, do you want to add something?
Yeah, no, Durlabh, I just had one question actually. So at COP27, I think you mentioned about the role of, how the education of young children has been impacted the most due to this climate crisis. If you could just
Yep.
highlight a bit about that as well.
Yeah, so one of the things that I've been working since COVID, right? It's working with young children, right? Especially like I'm talking about below 15, so quite young actually, not like under 18 or something like that. And one of the organization that I'm part of, Plan for the Planet, one thing that they do is they work with young children across different countries, right? And they mobilize young people, enable them to take actions to educate their fellow friends, fellow classmates, for example, right? And that essentially is how Plan for the Planet was organized, or how it came to be, for example, right? And like the reason why I'm emphasizing, and I want to emphasize, especially in terms of children, are because they will be the most demographic. If you're looking at it in terms of number, they will be the most affected group of people, of citizens, for example, right? And they have done the less, right? They really haven't really contributed to climate crisis by any standard of measure, right? So that's one thing that why I'm really interested in to work with them. Also, at the same time, if you look at like all of us, like we are probably in the early 20s or late 20s or early 30s, or like again we are probably in our 20s or more, right? So we have grown up, right? We had those opportunities. We were able to play in our playgrounds without fearing of what the climate pollutants are like today, right? Like are there what are the AQI level, for example, for the city, right? But usually right now, for the last few years, we are seeing that a lot of cities, especially in northern Punjab, right? Punjab side, northern areas of Pakistan or India, or even some cities of Bangladesh, right? And Nepal, I would say not so much Nepal, but then the if you look at historical AQI level, it's creeping up to where it usually were. So they are making our decisions that okay, if we have a good indicator today, then we will let our kids, our young members of the society play outside, right? So this is not fair to them, right? We have gone through our phase, right? Like again, this is a very catchphrase that I use. Like again, it is my sincerest hope that right these young people have a fair chance at life, right? They should have all the opportunities, all the time in the world that we had growing up, and that is what I work towards. Right, I see a couple of questions, Purnima. If you want to add something to this or a follow-up questions, happy to answer those. Otherwise, I will start with the other two questions.
No, please go ahead. Thank you. Thank you so much for highlighting that, Durlabh. Please go ahead with the other question.
Thank you. So the first question, another question from Parth is, what is your viewpoint on carbon dioxide removal, right? So essentially, I have a love-hate relationship with these type of technologies, because what we are basically saying or what's being said in these international negotiations or international forums about this technology, oh, they are our saviors and everything. And if you were to ask any company that is working on it, okay, how much energy you are putting in to take out that 1 kg of carbon dioxide, right? It's producing more carbon dioxide to suck 1 kg of carbon dioxide. So again, I don't have the numbers, but what if I were to just make some numbers here for sake of comparison and say, okay, it takes 2 kilograms of carbon dioxide to suck 1 carbon dioxide of carbon dioxide. It doesn't make sense, right? At the same time, the technology isn't ready, but the amount of energy that it requires it's astronomical, right? Because it's not very feasible, at least at this current iteration. And like I'm from technology background, right? So I can understand the hype behind it or the fanfare behind it, or as just something that is like a silver bullet that will help solve our carbon emissions problems. If you really want to work on carbon dioxide removal, we already have a very very simple, very economical. It also allows biodiversity increasement, right? There are trees, right? You don't need to create. Like again, I see as a technologist or from a tech person perspective, the shine behind it, right? But again, it's not there yet. It's at least, I'm like, to my own understanding, it's at least 10-15 years down the line. But we already have a great tool that can remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and gives out oxygen in return, right? There are trees. So, but ultimately, like, I can understand why the need of carbon dioxide removal or any such technologies in the future. But that's what my like love and hate relationship is with these type of technologies. So let me move on to the question of Deepak. Carbon sequestration through biomass development. Again, this I had put like couple of slides in for today on this, like how biomass could really save us because of the number of domesticated cows, for example, or any pet animals, right? And especially in the South Asian context. So yeah, I think it does help a lot, because like I personally have visited a lot of villages where they are using it biomass for a lot of their daily needs. But I think what you really wanted to ask, Deepak, was how could we improve the efficiency essentially, and what kind of techniques or research would be required to make it a more sustainable process, right? So I would agree with you. A lot of things are happening in that regard, but at the same time, I personally believe that like again, you can have a very good sustainable system, especially in relation to biomass development in small communities. But I don't know if you would be able to scale it up to cover entire cities, for example, right, or parts of cities even. But for local needs, I think it's the best way to go about it to cover the local energy needs. But at the same time, it's very hard to scale up, right? So yeah, that's what I have to say on this. Any other questions, guys?
And if anyone has any other questions or would like to reach out to Durlabh, would you like to paste your any email ID or anywhere that people can reach out to you?
Sure thing. The best place would be my LinkedIn. Feel free to connect. Happy to have any conversations or any exchange over LinkedIn. And yeah, that's the best place to reach me.
Thank you. Yes, and thank you so much, Durlabh, for highlighting such important points, unpacking COP27 for us as well. Thank you so much. It was indeed a very wonderful and insightful session. And thanks again. Thanks again for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Purnama, for inviting me. Again, it's a pleasure. And yeah, hopefully a lot more engagements to come in the future, and really looking forward to what you guys are up to in the future ahead. So yeah, thank you.